Salutations, respected viewers. I'm George from Ireland. Here I am outside Brompton Cemetery in London. So you can see this monumental arch entrance and some offices built into the side of it. Anyway, this is one of the most fashionable places to be buried in London. It's fair to say a lot of people would be seen dead here. In fact, they are dying to get in. And it's in that spirit of gallows humour that I intend to conduct this tour of one of London's sacred seven, the seven necropolises that were built by Act of Parliament from 1833 till 1840. Necropolis is in City of the Dead. Okay, west of London and Westminster Cemetery, there we go. 1839 they put this up, but the first interments were 1840. There's a bit of an open day. Now it's open 365 days a year, but often they're fairly limited hours of daylight usually, because in the midwinter you don't know what kind of freaks would like to come here for an all-night party, Satanists and whatnot. Sorry, Satanists. Anyway, it's open free of charge, as this confirms. So just to keep the grave robbers out, that's why they lock it up. It being summer, it's closing at 8 p.m. And this cafe is fairly new. I've been here many, many times, but I've never seen it so well attended. An almost jubilant atmosphere, okay? So I was reading a quotation from somebody recently, a 19th century quotation. The chap was saying, it's only when you're at a grave that you are affirmed of the fullness of life and you're made to reflect upon its brevity, its fragility, and therefore it might impel you to really squeeze every last drop of pleasure out of life whilst it lasts. Okay, so there are catacombs here we're going to see, and they can take a tour of this. It's administered by the Royal Parks, and you can get tours here almost every Sunday, whatever the weather, starting at 2 p.m. I believe at that lodge behind me. So Brompton is this district in the west of London, and look, free pedicab rides. Free pedicab rides, wow, how about that? And not usually free. So it's supposed to be a garden of sleep, and it's a very flat area, so perhaps it's a sense of waste of land. They could have done something else with it, as it was flat. Very easy to construct. MD. Okay, look at this little mausoleum, medical doctor. But now in British English people often say MB, because it's medicine bachelor of. All right? So building these little houses very much inspired by the ancient Romans. Remember, the Romans, they didn't build their cemeteries in lonely places. They built them on the road out of town, so people would pass by them all the time, go in and visit your relatives and speak to them. Imagine that they could hear you hold a party on their birthday, something like that. Pour wine into the grave as a good alternative for blood, just to keep the dead going. And then we see these monumental masons did fantastic work erecting these things here. So many notable personages are laid to rest here. You see these angelic figures, but looking sorrowful, I'm afraid. So that's that. Anyway, there are over 600 trees here. Many of them are London planes, but there are 60 different species of trees in this graveyard. You can see many of these are not tended very well. You see, looking back a little further, you'll see it's sort of higgledy-piggledy, somewhat overgrown. Just trying to think of famous people who sleep here eternally. Oh my goodness, there's that well-known German singer. The guy died in 1948, just off Edgware Road. His name will come to me. He sang "Es ist der schönste Tag in meinem Leben." He was a refugee here from National Socialism. All right, so Emmeline Pankhurst is buried here. And here we are. Okay, born 1858, died 1928. So she's a Mancunian. Best known for her contribution to the campaign for votes for women, her motto being deeds, not words. We now say action, not words. There we are. Boom. Now, just in case any trouble starts, there goes the law, and very intimidating these two are anyway. So Emmeline Pankhurst, her husband Richard Pankhurst, was a barrister, and he tried to argue the legal case that women ought to be allowed to vote, but he didn't get anywhere. So have a little closer look at the memorial. There she is. As though sleeping in the attitude of an angel with her hand up in benediction. And then you can see the ribbons have been laid and the floral wreath in tribute. So the National Union of Women's Suffrage Societies and the Women's Social and Political Union were the two main organisations that spearheaded the campaign for female suffrage, that's to say, granting women the right to vote. And the colours are there because it's meant to be purple for honour, white for purity, and green for nature. So she's a very well-known figure in the early 20th century. I shan't tell her whole story, but her daughters Sylvia and my goodness, who's the other one? Her name is Christabel, were very active as well. She had another daughter and another son who were not involved in the movement. Okay, so I shall pass on. Perhaps you're getting a flavour of the place. Now, there are some catacombs. In case you don't know what those are, there's sort of an underground corridor along which people are buried. Unfortunately, there's a long queue. It's booked up hours ahead. I might try and get into that a little bit later. Now, I'm going to show you some people, the sort of people who might want to go to an overnight party here. This is kind of why they lock it up. Take a look. Okay, all clad in deepest black. Now, so as I say, this is a garden of sleep, and it's meant to be monumental. So the most prominent people paid for these very prominent locations for their grave. That's the bloke I was talking about, Richard Tauber, who died. He's Austrian, not German. Died in 1948. Okay, so listen to his song. You can still find it on YouTube. And so very affluent people have these little houses for them built. So slightly after Kensal Green, that's 1833, about the same time as Highgate Cemetery. There's West Norwood. There were a few more built around that time. So Dr. John Snow of the Broad Street Pump, he also finds eternal repose here. And I'm just trying to think who else is buried here that you might have heard of. Her name escapes me. That Indian princess who was adopted by Queen Victoria. John Gentleman Jackson, who was a well-known prize fighter, bodyguard of King George IV, and on and on. So we'll see some more of them. And there are quite a few military personnel laid to rest here. And you see some Celtic crosses there with the sun disk around it, because obviously it goes back to pagan times when in Ireland, Scotland, Wales, perhaps parts of England, people used to worship the sun. So people from those parts of the British Isles, they sometimes have these symbols. It doesn't mean that they're not Christians. Like, Celtic Football Club, that's the symbol with a sun disk around it. Okay, occasionally you'll come across headstones where there are inscriptions in other languages, like Polish, Russian, German, and so forth. And then you'll see that some of the crosses on the graves have fallen over, not been replaced. Now, Beatrix Potter of the Beatrix Potter of which fame, sorry, there's a fallen cross above my finger. Beatrix Potter, who wrote those books about Peter Rabbit, she lived not far from here, and she often strolled around, and by studying the headstones that inspired her with many names for fictitious characters such as Mr. Nutkin. So we're very close to Chelsea Football Club stadium called Stamford Bridge, and so sometimes you'll hear the cheering from it here. Alright, so you're not allowed to cycle off the main path, but you are allowed to cycle on this central avenue. So I'm not going to walk around the whole of it. I have done so before. Right, so I'm not sure if the cemetery is full. I have a feeling that it is. There we are. So anything else I should point out about it? Well, not really. We're going to come up, there's one chapel. The idea was to build 3, but for reasons of cost, they actually just left it at 1. And they have these, the catacombs, so the roof of the catacombs, if you will, are in 2 semicircles. It's inspired by St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, or St. Peter's Square, coming out like 2 arms embracing the world. You can hear the tube going by over that away. So if you're going to come here, West Brompton station is the nearest one. The tube goes there, and the London Overground Railway also will take you here. And those are both behind me. But at the other entrance, we're close to Fulham Broadway tube station. Oh my goodness, a lot of them. What are these people called? Goths or what? You'll see what I'm talking about. I've never seen so many people clad in black. I'm presuming they're not actually going to a funeral. Faintly macabre, sinister, think you not? So, because I know some people would kind of break into graveyards late at night and have these drunken and debauched parties. Get the idea? Okay, so people on a guided tour. Anyway, I must go on one of those tours. I've never actually been on one. There we are. And if you are here towards closing time, there is a car going around quite slowly with a loud hailer saying, please leave, the gates are closing, please leave. And there's one gate you can get out, up that way. You can't come in that gate, it only allows you out. So there we are. And way back in 1935, some man was trying to climb in over the railings and managed to spike himself on the railings, and he was somehow got off it, but he died of the injuries he sustained a few days later. So, look at this. Is this going to be the Blessed Virgin? I'm not sure. And the one thing about these statues is that they tend not to survive so well, that the limbs tend to break off. There we are. So, anyway, it's like visiting a park, but obviously fascinating. So after this, don't worry about money too much. Enjoy yourself. You know not the day nor the hour. So yeah, it just underscores one's mortality. So when I'm going to bed at night, I am not asking myself how much money did I make, how much do I spend. I'm saying how much happiness did I get out of the day. So anyway, Benjamin Boud was the one who designed it. I hope I pronounced it correctly, B-O-U-D. So giving a bit of a flavour of it just off the main avenue. Okay. So what do you think? Appealing? Would you pay it a visit if you were here? Anyway, the sky's the limit for these things, for these tombs. And I've spoken to an undertaker, and the cheapest you can get is £1,000 with no attendant, and it's obviously cheaper to do whatever it's called, to have a cremation than it is to bury people. And in a lot of cemeteries you can't have the grave forever. The relatives move away or forget about whoever it was, and eventually the bones can be dug up and moved and blah blah blah. As the 1830s, when Parliament legislated for the creation of all these cemeteries, is because there was really no space left in London's churchyards. Had just been filled over the centuries. And I've heard of a place like Hong Kong having high-rise graveyards because obviously land is just so expensive. So here we are, this is what I'm talking about. The catacombs are under these things. And on the other side, this is not the curved bit. On the other side, I'll show you how it's semicircular. Okay. So obviously tens of thousands of people are buried in here. So it's an Anglican graveyard, but you don't have to be an Anglican. People of other religious denominations are buried here as well. Now, down towards the catacombs, those bits aren't open, but I'll have to ask somewhere else about getting onto the tour of the catacombs. It's pretty unusual. It's only about thrice per year the catacombs are open. Now, towards the end of September, there's another open weekend, which is not just for here, but for lots of places in the United Kingdom which are not usually open to the public. For one weekend, they have open doors, including the Royal Necropolis of Frogmore. That's in the grounds of Windsor Castle, and that's where lots of members of the royal family are interred. Not kings and queens, but princes and princesses, sort of second-degree members of the royal family. So I intend to pay a visit to that. For example, King George VI and his wife, who was Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, they're both buried in Windsor Castle under the floor of St George's Chapel. St George's Chapel, of course, became famous around the globe once again because that's where Miss Kate Middleton wed Prince Harry in May 2018. Okay, so over here we're going to see a bit of, that is Stamford Bridge Stadium, as in where Chelsea Football Club play. So actually, Chelsea don't play in the borough of Chelsea. We're about half a mile inside the borough of Fulham. Doesn't really matter. So let me see. They've got things for sale here. Okay, I thought it might be information about the graveyard. So you can see it's almost a mile long, the graveyard. Side to side, I think it's not quite as big. So, very substantial area. And we'll have other things like obelisks as well as angelic figures staying here. So usually they've got nothing for sale here. So the obelisk I was talking about, and they don't have loads of guided tours, so they just have one on Sunday. So I'll be able to inquire about the catacombs in a minute. So remarkably cheery and upbeat atmosphere, considering what this place is about. But no point moping about. Us being miserable won't bring back the dear departed for one moment. Ooh, and look at this. What a way to have your send-off in this old style hearse. You know that one, I'm a poet and I don't know it, I speak in rhyme all the time. I added a couplet, I'll use verse till I'm in the hearse. So a hearse is for transporting coffins, and it's got a crown on it. And then the undertaker's attendant, but he doesn't look very lugubrious. Remember Oliver Twist? And when the undertaker takes it out of the what's it called, out of the workhouse and says yes, he has such a long, tristful face. He'd make a fantastic mourner, because people of quality would often hire extra mourners to look gaunt and sad, grieving at their graves. So there we are. It had a royal coat of arms in it. One was actually hired by them. Undertaker since 1703. There we are. And then gangsters, there were these gangland funerals where they would have horse-drawn carriages for their hearse, and several black horses drawing it, and all sorts of floral tributes spelling out dad or whatever. So wearing black plumes on the horses' heads, and obviously led by an undertaker in a black top hat and so forth. Okay, so you get the idea. There's all this ritual of death, and mourning was taken very seriously. You know, a widow getting up into black a year after her husband's death, or you know, if your parents died but wear nothing but black for a year, not accept invitations to a party. You think just at the time you might need some social support. When your child died, you didn't necessarily do that because it was just so common. You wouldn't be able to get on with life. In the early 19th century, they say a third of children died before reaching the age of 5. So if you responded so strongly to the death of an infant, you just wouldn't be able to function. And so widows not supposed to get married for a year after their husband's death. I don't know if the same applied to widowers, but some of them were doing it in 6 months. I know of a certain death in the family which occurred in 1969, and the whole family got up into mourning for the funeral. 10 years later, another close relative died, and nobody wore mourning. They might have wore a black tie if you're wearing that, but not the whole black outfit, black crepe on the door, things like that, covering up mirrors to show that you're not vain and not thinking about looking good, things like that. Okay, so this is about enough about Brompton Cemetery. There are exits out that way, and there's another exit about this way. So I give you one last 360-degree view of it, and there you're seeing the chapel, the dome of the chapel. And over here we're seeing Chelsea Football Club, as in Stamford Bridge Stadium. There's no actual bridge there anymore. No, not Stamford Bridge in Yorkshire, where their battle was fought in September 1066. Okay, there's obviously no match on right now, otherwise we'd hear the raucous cheering. That's enough from Brompton Cemetery.